Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast on MMA Unhinged. Another episode of the March and Silva MMA show. And we have such a great show to talk, a great episode here this week. Last weekend, was one of the greatest MMA events that the UFC have hosted, that MMA has probably ever witnessed. From pillar to post, it was action-packed with excitement, finishes, it was truly, truly crazy. And as always, my co-host Oscar Silva is here to join me. Oscar, how's it going?
There's so many headline-worthy stories coming out of that card. You look at the main card, you have event Volkanovski truly cement himself as possibly the best fighter in the world. And then in the co-main event, you had a new champion in the fight of the year. And then you had Dricus du Plessis shock the world by finishing Robert Whitaker. And then you had Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner, which would be fight of the night on most nights. And that was an upset as well. And then you open the card up with Bo Nickel just destroying Val Woodburn in under a minute without wrestling. It was phenomenal. Then you get to the prelims, and we were just truly spoiled. I think that card not only met my expectations, it exceeded them. And what's nuts is that card, if you look at it on paper, is not going to be as good as these next couple pay-per-view cards coming up. It's wild, and that card will be cemented in our memories for decades to come, I believe.
Absolutely agree. You just talked about it there, so why not? Let's get into the show and talk about the action-packed card. I mean, let's start off with the main event at the top of the bill. It was Alexander Volkanovski once again defending his belt against a tough challenger in Yair Rodriguez, but ultimately the Australian had way too much for the Mexican. It was pretty much a schooling from Volkanovski. He's way too good. It doesn't matter where he takes this fight. He's going to beat you. He's going to beat you at your own game. He's going to beat you in wrestling, the grappling department. Volkanovski is one of the best in MMA right now, and if not one of the best in MMA that we have ever had. And I truly believe he deserves another shot at this Islam Makhachev. The first fight was so close. So close. Arguably, people had him winning. It was that close. Islam Makhachev is that good that we kind of disregard and try and basically say Volkanovski is great because he is great. Volkanovski is one of the greatest of all time, and I feel like he proved it once again against Yair. Yair, we talked about it coming into this fight, is a tricky customer. His kicks, his snappy jab, his right hand, everything about him is so sharp. But Volkanovski, I gotta say, he kind of made it look easy once again.
I could not have stressed more on the preview show that if Volkanovski wrestled, this fight would not be close. And what did he do? He went out there, and in rounds 1 and 2, he smushed Yair Rodriguez, landing ground and pound from the top, busting him open, and slowly breaking him. Then come round 3, the guy's standing. Yair is having success with those kicks at range. I fear that Volk maybe would do that for too long and risk losing, but he turned it right around after that unfortunate clash of heads. He went out there, he stunned Yair on the feet, and then he just slammed him as hard as he could to the ground and went nuts with that ground and pound. Just ruthless. Herb Dean gave Yair every opportunity he could to get back in the fight, but Yair was straight up broken and bested and outclassed by Volkanovski, who I believe is the best featherweight to ever do it.
Absolutely agree. He put on an absolutely fantastic performance once again, and we kind of talked about how good Yair was going into this, and I think it was credible. It was justified. Look at his recent performances against Josh Emmett, back in the past against Brian Ortega. Yes, you might not regard that submission or think it's a legitimate decision, but at the end of the day, he got that finish or shoulder injury, whatever you want to call it, against Brian Ortega. He's only ever really been tested against the best, and that is Volkanovski. That is Holloway, and that is Frankie Edgar back in the day. But once again, Volkanovski comes on top. He's one of the greatest of all time that we've ever had. The way he mixes it up, I think that's what makes him so good. He mixes it up so well. He can grapple. He can wrestle. He can submit you. And 1 minute he's trying to knock you out. The way he mixes up is second to none. One of the best in the world right now, without shadow of doubt. And obviously, I mean, he's got a tough fight coming up next in either Ilya or maybe Islam Makhachev. It doesn't get any easier for the Australian.
Yeah, that's not going to be an easy fight against Ilya Taporia, who is undefeated, and I believe there's a good chance we see that fight possibly November, December. Volkanovski says he wants to get in there before the end of the year, and Ilya says he'll gladly wait. So I cannot wait for that one. That will be a barn burner for sure. But I'm for sure picking Volkanovski there.
Absolutely. I would pick Volkanovski over Ilya. But the rematch, if they do go down ahead of Volkanovski versus Islam, what is your pick for that? How do you reckon that goes down for the second time?
I had Islam picked with great confidence in the first time, but this time around, I'm going to have to go with Volkanovski because of his ability to adjust and the fact that he had Islam nearly finished at the end of that fight. I really think Volkanovski is that damn good that he's going to be a double champion.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Volkanovski, one of the best in the world, as we talked about, and we'll keep it slowly moving on swiftly into the co-main event. The third time Pantoja and Brandon Moreno had fought, and guess what? It was the same result. Alexandre Pantoja getting his hand raised, this time by a razor split decision. Pantoja submitted Brandon Moreno, beat him on points, and then obviously beat him on points again. This one was a tough fight. But what I ultimately saw here was Moreno got hit way too much. And Pantoja, my God, can he pull it out the bag when he needs to?
Yeah, we pointed out the fact that Pantoja had no championship round experience, so we kind of assumed he would fall apart. And visually, he did fall apart. The guy was very tired, and he kind of abandoned technique later in that fight. It was just heart from him, and damn, that was effective. He had enough will in him to take Brandon Moreno to the ground, use his jiu-jitsu, that back, and secure enough control time to sway the judges in rounds where he was losing the exchanges on the feet against the much quicker Moreno. Moreno proved that he had made major improvements in his striking and his footwork, and he wasn't as hittable as he used to be. But it wasn't enough because Pantoja's jiu-jitsu is that high level. But don't get me wrong, Brandon Moreno, he broke his arm or his hand, I believe, in round 2, and that may have had something to do with the result here. So I would not count out Brandon Moreno should they fight again. But I'm kind of kicking myself for not picking the underdog Pantoja when I knew for a fact he had a really good shot at winning.
Yeah, and absolutely, he did get a hand raised. Ultimately, I do agree with the scorecards. There was a few people on Twitter saying that maybe Moreno should have got his hand raised. I think Pantoja did enough throughout the 5 rounds. I have no arguments for Pantoja getting his hand raised. I think he was just more effective with his striking and his grappling. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And Ben Cartilage, who scored the fight 49-46 for Brandon Moreno, was ridiculous.
Ludicrous.
Because if you score that, then that means you scored every round after round 1 for Moreno, which is ridiculous because the guy was losing rounds due to effective grappling like multiple times. Round 5 for sure was a very clear round for Pantoja. Round 4 as well. I actually scored rounds 2 and 3 for Moreno, but yeah, I thought rounds 1, 4, and 5 were for sure Pantoja rounds. The guy just secured the position so well, and he himself held his own on the feet. It wasn't like he was getting dropped in those rounds.
Absolutely agree. A fantastic co-main event. And we talked about earlier, this card was absolutely second to none. One of the best cards I've witnessed in a while. And as you talked about, the future cards coming up are even better. It's ridiculous. We've got such a good time coming up. Let's talk about the upset of the night, in my eyes anyway. It was Dricus du Plessis versus Robert Whittaker. I felt like I learned a valuable lesson in this one. Heading into this one, I was overlooking Dricus so much. I was disregarding everything he had. But I think that partly was because what we have seen from Robert Whittaker recently and in the past is that he was that good. His striking wise, he would pick people apart except from Israel Adesanya. Other than Israel Adesanya, he had really not lost to no one. He was, the second guy in the division, but Dricus come in there and absolutely stole everything. Hard work and dedication and a winning mentality is what got Dricus over the line in this one. Dricus just completely walked through him, throwing his power shots, and I never really thought I would see. Obviously, except from Adesanya picked him apart and ultimately got him the finish. But Rob Whittaker was hurt by a jab. I feel like that really shows the power that Dricus has in his South African hands.
I'm lucky that DraftKings Sportsbook does not accept houses, because if that was the case, I'd be a homeless man right now. I'd have bet my house on Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker was actually doing really well in the first half of round one. He was looking to be the much quicker technical guy using that jab on Dricus du Plessis, but everything turned around once Dricus du Plessis got that headlock takedown and then landed an elbow that busted Robert Whittaker open. He attempted the Darce choke. He was looking tremendous at the end of round one, and he stole it in my book and on all three judges' scorecards. And Whittaker looked to be in very rough shape at the end of that round. And I feel like Dricus du Plessis is bigger than we give him credit for. The guy is an absolute unit, and I feel like he was able to bully the former welterweight Robert Whittaker in there, which is very tough to do because Yoel Romero, who barely makes weight at middleweight, was unable to really do that to Robert Whittaker. And I truly think that Whittaker is even better than he was back when he was champion. So this is such a big win for Dricus du Plessis. And Dricus du Plessis, I believe, had made improvements from the Brunson fight. He wasn't as reckless because when he drops Whittaker with the jab in round two, he doesn't go swinging for the fences right away. In fact, he goes and he attacks the body, and that's what makes Whittaker unable to defend himself properly, the fact that he got folded by the body shot. So for me, Dricus du Plessis 100% has a shot to defeat Adesanya, but I'm definitely not picking him. I think he probably gets knocked out. But he's not a man I will underestimate ever again like this.
Absolutely agree. Me and you both, we have been royally fooled on this one. Dricus, though, I feel like he thrived under that, being the massive underdog. Because ultimately, really, there was really no pressure on him. Everyone was overlooking him in this fight. He was in there, flowing, doing what he had to do, what he does normally. And ultimately, what we have seen as well, Dricus du Plessis with a new nose is a different animal. We'll keep it moving on slowly, swiftly to the next fight. Dan Hooker getting the nod versus Jalen Turner. Another split decision on the main card. This one was close, though. This one was probably closer than the co-main event. Dan Hooker coming on strong in the second and third round. The first round was very tough for the Australian. Jalen Turner was looking good, but I feel like his gas tank just worn on him a little bit and we saw him slow down. And that's when we saw Dan Hooker take over a little bit. This was a good win for Dan Hooker after, over against a young, I say young, Jalen Turner is still quite, I say quite, he's 28 years old, but yeah, Jalen Turner had been on a good streak before the Mathias Gamrot fight. Before that, he was on a five-fight winning streak. Beat some really good guys, obviously Brad Riddell, Jamie Malarkey, Ursus Medic. So this win is a good win for Dan Hooker, and it sets him back on that right track and gives him that sort of momentum that he probably needs. Dan Hooker getting back on the right track over a good win of Jalen Turner. Claudio Puelles and now Jalen Turner on his resume. He's only lost to Islam Makhachev, Arnold Allen, Michael Chandler, and Dustin Poirier in recent years. That is some run. Dan Hooker is an absolute savage to accept these fights.
I feel like we may have exaggerated Dan Hooker's lack of durability heading into this fight because Dan Hooker, he probably lost round one. I feel like Jalen Turner might have been the quicker guy in there. Of course, had the reach advantage. But come round two, Dan Hooker gets smacked with a foot right in the cranium. And somehow he survives after Jalen Turner puts the pressure on him. He reverses the pressure on Jalen Turner, hurts him, and just makes Jalen Turner want out of the fight at a certain point. So Jalen Turner dropped round two, around he was convincingly winning because he got stuck in a rear naked choke right at the end of the round, and he kind of saved by the bell there. Uh, Dan Hooker's newly bleached blonde hair was red at the end of that fight because this was a straight up war. I cannot believe this fight went the distance. Round three, it was clear that Jalen Turner was very tired, and Dan Hooker had more left in the tank. He wanted to win more, and he was able to push through with a broken arm and a fractured orbital bone. And yeah, Dan Hooker is just one.
Absolutely agree. Till this day, I don't know how
Are you
Dan
still
Hooker
there?
took that. Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm not too sure whether we are having some good connection with Oscar. I'm hoping everyone can still hear me. I'm going to quickly turn it up and listen.
All right,
Yep, I
I'm back.
sound good. Oscar, can you hear me? 1, 2, check, check.
I can. I can.
Okay, that's good. We'll move on to the next fight against Bo Nickel. Next fight with Bo Nickel versus Val Woodburn. Yeah, pretty much what we said. Domination. We disregarded Val Woodburn because Bo Nickel was that good, and we were completely right.
Yeah, Val Woodburn, I'm not sure his UFC caliber. Bonical, on the other hand, blue chip prospect. I think we're looking at a future title contender. He did not rush his work here. It was not all that sloppy. He picked his shots and absolutely wrecked Val Woodburn. Not much else to say there, but I would like to see him take a step up in competition. Not ranked opposition quite yet, but somewhat near the top 15.
Absolutely agree. Maybe someone who's just fell out the top 15 would be a good test. 185 pounds. He's got a new star in their hands, as he talks about, a blue chip prospect. Completely agree. No other way to put it myself. We move on to the next one, and that was the retirement fight of Robbie Lawler. And my gosh, Robbie Lawler was on his retirement fight, his last fight ever. His last ever MMA fight. When have you ever seen someone look that good in their last MMA fight and go out like the way he did?
I would say never. Um, there's been cases where people have not declared their retirement and then they retire afterwards, like Habib and Amanda Nunes. But Robbie Lawler had made it very clear to everybody that this was the last one heading in, and that never goes well, just as Shogun Hua. And yeah, Robbie Lawler got the quickest knockout of his entire career in his retirement fight. That is unheard of. And it was not against a guy with a glass chin either, Nico Price. Nico Price is actually known for being able to take a shot. And he absolutely folds him with this uppercut and a shot to the temple in the clinch. Um, it was a walk-off KO, and Robbie Lawler lets out all the emotion in the post-fight interview. They actually play a video package for him because they had so much airtime left on ABC. It was wonderful to see Robbie Lawler just get no damage whatsoever in his retirement fight and be able to look back upon his career with pride and not lose in a shameful way.
Yeah, you know what they say is the ones that you don't see, and ultimately, I don't think Nico Price saw that shot coming. It was phenomenal. An uppercut inside the clinch, out go the lights. And I don't know what the saying was, but out go the lights in Alabama. Is that it?
What'd you say?
I'm not sure. Is the quote "out go the lights in Alabama"? Is that the quote?
I'm unaware of that quote.
Oh, I must be so off. Anyway, guys, excuse me. We'll keep it moving on to the next one. As we talked about, the fights were good from top to bottom. This one was probably the only one that really kind of disappointed me a little bit. Tatsuro Taira versus Edgar Chairez. Um, I did think the Japanese was good heading into this one, and now I don't know about you, Oscar. I have a little bit of questions over his ceiling. Yeah, he got the job done. It was unanimous, but I think Edgar Chairez came in at short notice, and I was kind of impressed with him more than I was for Tatsuro. It was a weird one.
Yeah, this was a weird one, but I would not go as far as to say that. I think this was a really bad performance from Edgar Chairez because, sure, the guy's got a solid submission game, but you have to know when a submission is not quite there. Kept on going for that guillotine and failing until the end. He actually gets the guillotine in very tight, but the clock kind of runs out on him. I feel like he probably should have looked for another way to finish the fight. Tatsuro Taira was very clearly the better striker, and on the ground, he really was having his way with him, especially at the end of round two. Tatsuro Taira is still very young. I would not go. I would not go as far as to say he's not gonna be in the title mix eventually, just because he had a lackluster performance here. I did think he would get this finish, but Edgar Chairez is no slouch really. Yeah, weird fight as you said, but
I think I lost you at the end there, Oscar. But we'll keep it moving onto another one. Denise Gomish, shall we say, getting a knockout in 22nd over Yasmin. Yasmin, a 10-0 prospect heading into this one. It was quite spectacular. These things in MMA, they happen once in a while where we have a prospect coming in, and let's have it said. We'll say it plain and simple. Denise Gomes was kind of overlooked because Yasmin has been looking so good, and she goes in there, puts the hands on her, and knocks her out inside 20 seconds. When you look at Denise and see who she's been training with, this one makes a lot of sense. She has been swinging hands alongside Jessica Andrade, so in my eyes, that makes a lot of sense why she got this knockout. Yasmin 10-0 heading into this one, and unfortunately fell to her first defeat in her career. Man, oh man, Denise Gomez. I think we're losing Oscar there, but yeah, Denise Gomez has some power, and she showcased it here to that night. I mean, it was a spectacular performance, and another sub 30 knockout that we had this night. It was pretty crazy. It was pretty, the night was ridiculous and stacked throughout with finishes. I enjoyed it very, very much. Next one, Alonzo Menfield versus Jimmy Crute. This one, this one was weird to me. Obviously, they fought to a draw. Alonzo Menfield was on his way to winning in that draw until we got the fence grab 1 point to take away from him. But this one, I feel like he really showcased what he was made of. In the submission game, what Jimmy Crute is actually made of, by the way. That's what he specializes in his grappling department, and he submits him. Yeah. Jimmy Crute after this one, very, very emotional, which is understandable and probably predictable as well. This one was a big one for him. It just didn't really seem to get going. And the statement that he had released after it kind of makes a lot of sense. His head wasn't really there. He announced and said that he really needs to take some time away and get his full concentration back onto MMA. And that's I feel like we'll see Jimmy Crute have a few years off, maybe a year minimum off now. But yeah, this one was a weird one, but I also feel like it showed how good Alonzo Menfield is and how underrated he is. This is a fantastic win, and I talked about it in the last fight. He was on his way to victory until the fence grab. This one, he kind of really let there be no shadow of a doubt. He got the job done, submitted him, which I think is even more impressive because, as I talked about, Jimmy Crute is really known for his grappling. Oscar, hopefully, are you back?
Yeah, I am back. And let me just touch on that Yarigui versus Gomes knockout. So Yarigui
Oh,
was a big favorite. I think she was around uh, like 3-1 in that contest. And she got annihilated by Denise Gomes, and this is not the first time Gomes has done this in the UFC. She did this to the undefeated Bruna Brazil, so she's knocked out two prospects in the first round in the UFC. That is unheard of, really, at a strawweight. So I cannot wait for Denise Gomes' next fight. And as you touched on, Alonzo Menifield submitting Crute, who submitted Paul Craig, like the jiu-jitsu ace of the light heavyweight division. Um, I think that was a major statement from Alonzo Menifield, and it shows he's making improvements in his game. Jimmy Crute, on the other hand, is appears to be one of these failed prospects, and it's real sad to see. You do not want to see him turn out to be like a Kevin Lee who retired yesterday. Alonzo Menifield now is ranked, and I think if he's ever going to make a run towards contention, the time is now.
Absolutely agree. Phenomenal stuff from Alonzo Menifield. And as I talked about, we were talking before when you weren't here, Oscar. So many great finishes on this card. It was ridiculous. Another few there between Denise Gomes, a sub 30 knockout. And to be honest, I'm going to be completely honest as well. It's quite rare you see a knockout like that in women's MMA. I don't. There's only a select few in women's MMA that kind of possess that sort of power. But I talked about, if you know who Denise Gomes trains with and is alongside, it'll make a lot of sense. She trains alongside Jessica Andrade, for God's sake. Of course she'll have that power.
Yeah, Gomes goes for the kill every time out there. So I'm gonna definitely give a lot of credit to Loma Lubumi, who was able to beat her in her debut.
Absolutely. First four fights of the evening. We're going over these one very, very quick. Obviously, Jesus Aguilar with one of the best knockouts. It could have been this. This really could be fight of the knockout of the year contender. Absolutely starches Shannon Ross. Literally that knockout. When I see Shannon Ross fall to the ground, it literally reminds me of Michael Johnson when
Josh Emmett.
Josh Emmett. Yeah, man, that's some scary stuff. Cameron Simon getting a fairly easy ground and pound finish versus Terrence Mitchell. And I tweeted out, and obviously, I mean no disrespect to Terrence Mitchell, but I kind of just felt like he was in the right place at the right time to take this fight. He was in America. He had his visa. He took the opportunity. Obviously, it didn't work out for him, but I think the main thing for him and the big thing for him is he's inside the UFC, so he's going to get another shot. But there's people out there who I think deserves that shot inside the UFC. Like, for example, my good friend on the show, Conan Lochran, who I filmed with another interview, and that should be coming out this week, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But yeah, nonetheless, Terrence Mitchell is inside the UFC, but Cameron Simon improves to 9-0. Another finish. This finish was flawless. No fouls, no anything. He did it the way he wanted to. And obviously, Vitor Petrino getting a win over Marcin Prack now. Oscar, what did you make of the first four fights?
Yeah, I really thought they were very fun to watch, and everybody was pursuing the finish. Vitor Petrino was looked at more of a stand and bang kind of guy, but in this fight, even though he was inflicting damage on the feet, he goes for takedowns against the one-dimensional karate striker in Pacquiao, and eventually finds the submission. That was really impressive to see from Petrino, who I said was more of a striker coming in. And then you have Cameron Simon, no fouls, and he gets the easy ground and pound finish there. I really like his potential, and he's training with Dricus Du Plessis. And that gym appears to be very legit because they just coached a guy into a title shot.
Absolutely agree. That was it. That was UFC 290. A fantastic event, as we talked about, top to bottom. Pillars to post, knockouts left, right, and center. It was phenomenal. And we've got another event this weekend. UFC Vegas 77, if I am correct. And we'll quickly move this on to the next one. We'll talk about the main fight. And we talked about it briefly before we went on air. Holly Holm versus Mayra Bueno Silva. In my head, in my thoughts, Holly Holm immediately is the quick woman. The striking differential in this fight I believe, is going to be completely ridiculous. Holly Holm, I believe, will have her way, and she will just pick her apart. And it's quite ridiculous because, well, quite stunning as well. Holly Holm is 42 years of age, and it kind of feels like she's never ending. She's not aging because how quick she is on the feet. She can throw a jab as quick as anyone, men and women. She's very, very sharp, and same as a kick. She can get that right foot up to the chin in no time. She's very, very quick. But it's just the power, really. That's what she's lacking to really put people's lights out. Other than the Holly Holm, no, sorry, the Ronda Rousey head kick, and obviously the finish afterwards. I can't remember of too many finishes inside her career. But then again, as I talked about, Holly Holm, I think she's going to have too much for Silva on the feet, and she's going to have her way and pick her apart.
Yeah, I really think this is an easy matchup for Holly Holm. Sure, Bueno Silva, she's got the third most finishes, I believe, in the history of this division with 4. She's got 4 submissions. She's very good with the arm bars on the ground. She even submitted Jillian Robertson, who's the leader in who I believe is the leader in submissions in all of the women's divisions. Um, the big win she's got is Lena Landsberg. Lena Landsberg, who retired after the fight. That's not all that impressive to me. The only reason she's in this main event slot is she was set to fight Misha Tate, and they kind of just needed a main event for this card. That's the reason she's here. I don't believe she's longed for title contention. She was a former flyweight. She just started taking fights up at bantamweight, and she kept on winning them. So that's why she stuck around. Holly Holm is a proven commodity at bantamweight, a future Hall of Famer, challenged for the featherweight title, and she went to a split decision with Jermaine Durandamy. A lot of people thought she actually won that fight. So it shows you that she's got good size for this division. And Bueno Silva, I think she could probably still make flyweight, and I think that's gonna really help Holly here, who loves to have her opponents in the clinch and use her physicality. I think she's going to win this fight very convincingly. And in her last fight against Yana Kunitskaya, she did not look satisfied just winning a decision. She actually pursued the finish against Yana Kunitskaya, had her in big trouble there, and almost got a stoppage in round 3. So I think the longer the fight goes, Bueno Silva has no 5-round experience. Holly Holm does. I think Bueno Silva will slow down more and more. Her defense will only get worse. And I think she gets stunned with the signature Holly Holm had taken in round 5. And Holly Holm just pours it on and gets a TKO in round 5.
Absolutely agree. You talked about the size differential. Bueno Silva, as you talked about, a former flyweight, stepping up to bantamweight. And Holly Holm, I kind of feel like she's not really a small bantamweight either. She contested for the UFC women's featherweight championship against Jermaine Durandamy. So
Jermaine, yeah.
yeah, so I feel like the size as well is going to be too much for Silva. So I completely agree. We'll move on to 185 pounds. The co-main event. Sorry, Albert Durarev. Sorry, versus Junior Park. Junior Park. You know, he had a little bit of a streak going on in his recent fights. Before. It's actually now. He beat Eric Anders, beat Joseph Holmes, and beat Dennis Tunelin. Now he fights Albert Durarev, who, on the other hand, had a little bit of start on a run inside the UFC. Was making some waves. Obviously got that win over Roman Kopylov before losing to Joaquin Buckley. The doctor stoppage, and then obviously beat Chiji and Jun Kwani by split decision in his last fight. He had a little bit of hype around him before he came into the UFC. Obviously had a good performance against Roman Kopylov, but then again, I feel like it's kind of fell off a little bit. Maybe that could be due to inactivity. He's only just came back against Shijun and Connie this year. Before that, he almost been a year outside the game. And you know what? The big saying in the MMA is that recency bias. If you haven't fought in recent, you're going to soon forget to the fans. And shout out to Roundhouse Rants. An absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining the show. An absolute legend. Make sure you go check out his content. He does some really, really good previews about the upcoming fights. I like them. Thank you very much. Oscar, what do you reckon of the co-main event?
I think Jin Young Park is one of the most underappreciated guys in the middleweight division. He's won, let me see here, 6 of his last 7. He beat Marc-Andre Barrios, John Phillips, Tafan and Chukwi, Eric Anders, Joseph Holmes, and Dennis Tululin. Sure, a lot of those names are bottom of food chain kind of guys, but the guy is, I feel like he's very consistent. He's a well-rounded fighter, but when he has a clear grappling advantage, he will use it. But here against Albert Duraev, who's a Russian wrestler with some really good submission abilities, I don't think he's going to be able to use that wrestling successfully. So I think they're going to be striking a little more on the feet. And I think that battle is going to be kind of even. And I think should they be wrestling in the clinch, Duraev might have a very slight edge. Duraev really surprised me in his last fight against cheating Joe Kawani. He was an underdog in that fight, and he's able to squeak out a split decision, just threatening with the takedown threat. So he has a success on the feet, and I think he might do the same against Jin Young Park, who, as I said, has not fought a bunch of really good grapplers. The best grappler he fought in that mix was obviously RoboCop Gregory Rodriguez, but that was a fight where they decided to bang it out. And Jungle Park almost got that knockout, but he was in the pocket for too long and he got finished himself. So I think we're looking at a very close fight. Not going to be a barn burner, that's for damn sure. But I think Duraev wins a decision.
Yeah, completely agree. This one, bit of a lackluster middleweight co-main event. We're kind of going to get these cards a little bit because the pay-per-views that we have upcoming are completely ridiculous. So we can't really
Yeah,
complain. To
yeah,
be
we
honest,
got fight night main events on the prelims in the next pay per view.
absolutely. But yeah, we'll move on to Norman Dumont versus Chelsea Chandler. Seemingly the last 2 fighters in the UFC women's featherweight division. Maybe they'll have a decision to make after this, whether they move back down. We'll have to see and wait. We've also got Daniela Wolf as well. I think maybe that's it. I think that's what they've got. Not too sure what they're going to do with the
Josiane
division.
Nunez, Zara
Josie,
Farn,
that's it. Yeah, not too sure what
and
they're going
Zara
to actually
Farn. Yeah,
do
that's about it.
with that decision. That division. I don't see them going ahead with it and keeping it around. I think it'll be a division they'll eventually break off and let it scatter. Whether these ladies will have a decision to drop down to 135 pounds, I probably presume they will, and they probably will give it a go. But we have seen Norma Dumont try and make 135 pounds, and it is not pretty. Anyway, who have you got in this fight?
I think Norma Dumont should 100% win this fight because of her experience advantage. Norma Dumont is in the position that Chelsea Chandler is in today. Uh, like 3 years back, she made her debut against Megan Anderson. She gets destroyed, and then she goes on to beat Ashley Evans Smith, Felicia Spencer, and Aspen Ladd in the main event, if you can believe that. Then she loses to Macy Chiasson, and that was a very close fight. I just kind of feel like her fight IQ let her down in some spots in that fight. And then the Danielle Wolf fight, she dominates, gets multiple 10-8 rounds. And then the Carol Rosa fight, for me, was very impressive because I was high on Carol Rosa at one point. I thought she was going to challenge for the title, but she wins a close fight there. On the other hand, with Chelsea Chandler, we have somebody who's very raw, who is a Cesar Gracie student. Got good jujitsu, but on the feet, I don't think she's very polished there. She fought Julia Stoyarenko, who's just not high level. She's got a really bad record in the UFC. So that win for me says nothing. Norma Dumont, on the other hand, has beaten ranked fighters at bantamweight. I think she's gonna have a serious striking advantage here, and she does have a shot at getting a late TKO here. I think Norma Dumont should 100% win a unanimous decision.
Yep, completely agree. I think Norma Dumont is quite underrated, but the problem is she's in a division that is, as we talked about, is very little to none. She's only lost
Non-existent.
to, yeah, that's it. She's only lost, off the top of my head, if I can remember, she's lost to Megan Anderson, and I believe it might be oh no, she beat Felicia Spencer, right?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, big underdog in
Who
that spot too.
I wonder who was that other loss off the top of my head. It's kind of slipping my head.
Megan Anderson. Megan
Oh, Macy
Anderson.
Chiasson. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, her only losses to Macy Chiasson and obviously Megan Anderson. We'll move on. £155 lightweight showcase. Otman Azatar, once touted as a fantastic prospect, coming through, knocking people out. He was a real showcase piece, in the COVID times, knocking out Carmen Worthy. Obviously, that fantastic knockout versus Timo Pakalin, overhand right, starched him, made him twitch on the canvas. It was fantastic. It was all looking good for Otman Azatar, and then boom, everything went wrong. Was supposed to fight Matt Frivola in 2021, got released from the UFC for dropping off a suspicious bag in the COVID area of the UFC. What a funny time the UFC Fight Island was for the UFC. It was ridiculous. Got released for entering the area and potentially cancelling an event. I mean, it could have all went wrong for the UFC if he gave someone COVID, essentially. But yeah, he eventually got re-signed to the UFC and fought Matt Frivola back on his return, and he got knocked out. Ultimately, the reason why he got knocked out was I believe was due down to inactivity, and having that little bit of a ring rust. But I feel like what we also got to note as well, Matt Frivola is much better than we think. His record may not say that on paper, but Matt Frivola is going on an absolute tear right now. So
He beat
ultimately, I
Jalen
think
Turner.
exactly. So ultimately, I think that loss isn't the worst for Otman Azatar. But in terms of taking on Francisco Parado in this one, the Argentine coming in after a decision loss to Jamie Malarkey. Before that, he was 10-0. I feel like we're going to see Otman Azatar return back to winning ways. He was something special, getting them knockouts and really putting people's lights out cold. He has some serious power in his hands, so it'll be exciting to get him back on track. But they've got quite similar records. You never know what's going to happen. But yeah, I feel like that Matt Frivola loss isn't essentially too bad when we look at it, but it's going to be quite big to him to overcome that in this one, because obviously it was his first loss, professional loss, and it was quite a bad one. But if I'm him, I'm not taking too much into that, because Matt Frivola has gone on an absolute incredible run as of late.
Yeah. Ant-Man Zatar is one of these depth touch guys. A bunch of KOs in the first round is all you see on his record. And Francisco Prado, on the other hand, is another powerful striker who probably will win this fight if it goes the full 15, but I don't see this going the full 15. I think Prado fought a lot of bad competition on the regional circuit in South America. Then he runs into Jamie Malarkey, who's got a really good wrestling game. We're not going to see much wrestling here. I think they're going to be exchanging in the pocket, and I think Amin Azaitar will catch him in round one. There's not much else to say here, but I think Amin Azaitar is more proven as the harder hitter.
Yeah, completely agree. Plain and simple, we'll leave it as that. I like this card. There's a few underrated fights, and there's a few that are upcoming. But one that I would love to talk about is obviously Terrence McKinney versus Nassim Sadinov. Terrence McKinney is always in an exciting fight. Whether it goes his way or not is a different story. We have seen it in the past. Sorry, I'm accidentally clicking the wrong buttons. Here we are. Terrence McKinney, obviously starching, who I just talked about recently, who's up above the card, Matt Frivola, absolutely starched him in his debut in, what was it, 9 seconds or something silly like that. It was a jab and a left hand, absolutely starches him, knocks him out. He was on top of the 7 seconds. He was on top of the world. Then gets a rear naked choke win against France Ziam, loses to Drew Dober, ultimately empties the gas tank, tries to get the finish, has Drew Dober on skates, but couldn't get the finish. And obviously beat Eric Gonzalez. And then his last fight, oh man. A flying knee from Ismail Bonfim absolutely puts his lights out. Yeah. I feel like what we've got to worry for Terrence McKinney is when it gets to that second round, ultimately his opponent immediately turns the big favorite.
Yeah, Terrence McKinney is kind of a glass cannon, so to speak. The guy will go for the kill right away, and if he doesn't get it, he tends to fall apart. And a major error he keeps on making is he keeps on going for desperation takedowns and keeps on getting clipped with the knees and knocked out. I hope he addresses that heading into this one. His friendly guy Nazim Sadikov, who is well-rounded as well, but he does prefer to strike. He showed that in his Fight of the Night debut against Evan Elder. He was actually down 2 rounds, but he wins the fight due to a cut stoppage. So that wasn't the best of looks. I'm very high on Terrence McKinney. I still think he can be a ranked fighter eventually, should he address those pacing and cardio issues. And he did kind of address it in his last fight against Bonfim. He doesn't go that crazy in round 1. He paces himself a little more, but he gets outstruck and eventually knocked out. I think this will be a very exciting fight, but Nazim, he did get hurt multiple times against Evan Elder in his last fight. And I think if Terrence lands those same strikes, I think he probably puts him to sleep. Terrence um, almost knocked out Drew Dober. He dropped him twice. And that was part of that. He shows he can get the submission in round 1 against First Yan with complete domination. So I think he definitely has the wrestling advantage and the jiu-jitsu advantage. And he's got the speed advantage, of course. I think he'll get a finish in round 1. I don't think Nazim is high level enough to just weather that storm, quite honestly. But hey, he is out of that Serra-Longo camp. In that Serra-Longo camp, they coached Matt Fribble. I'm sure Matt Fribble is going to tell him to stay safe early, but I don't know if he can.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Terrence McKinney is different early in the fight. He's dangerous, he's sharp, he's powerful. But as I said, if it gets to that second round, ultimately, quickly, the opponent becomes the big favorite because that's where he kind of fades and eventually gets finished. We'll move on to the next one. Tucker Lutz versus Milsic Bakadarshian. Oh man, I'm terrible at names, but that's what we're going with. Milsic 7-2. Recently coming off a loss versus Joshua Kulabau, submission loss. 7-2 in MMA. Made his UFC debut at UFC Fight Night, and he got a head kick knockout. Before that, he got his contract in the Contender Series. Fought on the Usman versus Covington 2 card. Beat Breno Souza. He had a bit of a time away. Then fought Joshua Kulabau and lost. That could play a part in it. Tucker Lutz, on the other hand, if you look at his UFC career, not the greatest. Won his contract on the Contender Series in 2020. He had to go back-to-back Contender Series fights, actually, to get the contract. Then he beat Kevin Aguilar. Then he lost to Pat Sabatini and Daniel Pineda. So, ultimately, the Pat Sabatini loss, I don't think is a bad loss. Pat Sabatini, he's a bit of a prospect, got on a little bit of a good run before losing to Damon Jackson. But he recently returned to fight Lucas Almeida and got the job done. So Pat Sabatini, I don't think is a bad loss. But the other one, Daniel Pineda, not really convinced on that one, especially Daniel Pineda. I just don't think he's too good, really. Daniel, he's got a grappling game, probably about it. But yeah, this one, Milsic Bashidarian versus Tucker Lutz, is quite a cool one. Quite a close one to call. Who have you got, Oscar?
I think this is going to be a fun one. Tucker Lutz had to win 2 fights on Contender Series to get into the UFC because he's not much of a finisher. He's doesn't have some great jiu-jitsu pedigree. He doesn't really have knockout power. Milsic Bajisarni, on the other hand, he was knocking guys out in under 30 seconds. heading into the Contender Series. He beats Dennis Bazooka, who's out of the Serra-Longo camp, knocks out Colin Anglin, and then he outpoints Bruno Souza, who's a really good karate striker. And then against Kulabao, he shows his grappling isn't that high level. So Tagalot theoretically could get some success here with the takedowns, but I think he's a little too hittable, and Melsit Bagdasaryan will be able to clip him multiple times in this fight and win a decision.
That's the pick, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see here, Mercy Bagdasaryan is a very, very openly favourite according to Tapology fans. 86% of Tapology fans have picked Mercy Bagdasaryan. So a lot going on to him. Going into him, in this fight. A very big favourite, seemingly, according to the fans. Moving on. Estela Nunes versus Victoria Dudikova. 6-0, Victoria Dudikova. Entering, I believe, in a UFC debut. I believe this might be a new name that I've not seen. She had fought in the Contender Series versus Maria Silva, but for that, she had fought over in the Open Fight Championship, I believe, over in Russia and Ukraine and stuff like that. So 6-0, a lot of finishes outside the UFC. All of them really coming by rear naked choke, 3 rear naked chokes and 1 armbar victory. So it showcases her grappling as well. If you look at her opponent, Estela Nunes, 6-4 inside her MMA career. As of late, she's not gone on the best runs, losing to Ariana Carilosa, Sam Hughes, and obviously Yasmin Jurijoja that we talked about earlier in the episode. She came over with a lot of hype, to be honest, from one championship. Her only loss outside the UFC was to Angela Lee for the championship, actually, for the belt. Before that, then she beat Gina in Long and then came over to the UFC. She had a little bit of hype around her because she challenged Angela Lee. She fought for the belt. She thought maybe there was a bit of a slight that she'll come on to do well. But since that, she has not won a fight inside the UFC. She's 0-3. Is she going to go 0-4, Oscar?
I don't think so, man. I think she's shown so much, even in her losses. Like, it's just the cardio. In round 1, she always looks good. She was piecing up Ariane Carnelossi on the feet with her counter striking before she ultimately gasses out and gives up the submission in round 3. Then against Sam Hughes, she is piecing up Sam Hughes in round 1. But in round 2 and 3, she just gets outworked. And then against Yasmin Yaragui, she is able to hurt Yaragui. She drops her, but she herself gets dropped twice and eventually finished. So she's shown she's got some power in her hands. And Victoria Dudikova, I really am not sold on her. She comes into the Contender Series and she's injured, and she is able to win, but my goodness, the fight was so boring. She wins round 1 and round 3 with the control time, does not land anything of great significance. Um, her striking is not high level. I don't think her grappling is super high level either. Um, I just think that should this fight stay on the feet long enough, that Nunes can piece her up there and win a close fight. Don't get me wrong. You should not be betting on this fight from either side, but I think Estela Nunes probably will have a great enough advantage on the feet to win this one.
Dudikova, a 92% pick by Tapology. So a lot of confidence in the fans in Dudikova. When you see a
Wow.
6-0 come inside the UFC, it's always, it can either go two ways. They either come in and showcase how good they are, or they realize how good the UFC competition are. So it could really go a different way. But yeah, a lot of confidence in the Tapology fans. 92% on Dudikova, 57 by submission and 32% by decision. So, wow, showcases what they think of her. Moving on, Austin Lingo versus, oh my goodness, we're gonna Costa, 19-6. I'm going to call him Mel Mel Costa. I was going to try and attempt it. Austin Lingo, 9-2. He's been in the UFC. He's got, fighting out of Fortis MMA. He was 6-0 inside LFA before moving to the UFC. Now he's 2-2. So, he lost his UFC debut versus Yusuf Salau and then lost his last one against Nate Landwehr. Before that, he beat Jacob Kilburn and Luis Saldana. Costa, the debutant Brazilian, enters this fight. Oh, not debutant, sorry. The Brazilian who fought in his last fight against Thiago Moises. No luck handed there in his debut fight. Ultimately got submitted. Now he fights Austin Lingo. This one, this is quite a tough one to pick. Costa, who spent a lot of his career outside the UFC, eventually got in the shot against Thiago Moises. Who have you got one in this, Oscar?
I think that this is going to be a coming out party for Melquizael Costa. He had to fight Thiago Moises. Thiago Moises has got some really good jiu-jitsu, and he showed it off there, getting the rear naked choke right away. But now he's fighting Austin Lingo, who's a boxer and can get really outclassed by good kickboxers like Costa. Costa will probably look to replicate what Saldana did in round 1 of his fight against Lingo. Saldana just his cardio let him down there, but Costa has a much better proven gas tank, and I think he can outstrike Austin Lingo here. Austin Lingo doesn't have something in his game that will give Costa too much problems. I think that the striking will ultimately a striking battle will ultimately benefit Costa here.
I accidentally. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I accidentally. My mic accidentally fell off my desk. Apologies to the fans listening if that's any raucous sound or raucous sound. Sorry. The last 5 fights, or the first 5 fights of the evening: Ashley Evans Smith versus Alan Perez, Carl Deaton III versus Alan Munoz. Tyson Nam versus Azat Maxam. Gerardo Valdez versus Evan Alder, and obviously Jack Della Maddalena. Yes, you heard that correct. Versus Brazil Havez. We'll go over these ones very quickly. I'll give my rough picks. Jack Della Maddalena versus Brazil Havez. Sorry, Jack Della Maddalena is gonna unfortunately for Brazil he's gonna get it knocked out. Jack Della Maddalena probably shouldn't be fighting this low. I rate him so highly, but ultimately he's been very, very unlucky as of late to get an opponent. So I think he's going to look good in this one, obviously. Get the knockout win and move on to hopefully a top 15, a top 10 next. I mean, it is definitely justified and warranted at this point. Gennaro Valdez versus Evan Alder. This one, to be honest, I to myself, I don't have too much confidence on either side. 10-2 Mexican versus Evan Alder. Evan Alder, we talked about he has lost inside the UFC before. This one I really wouldn't pick, but I'm going to go with Jorano Valdez. I have more confidence in him. Tyson Nam versus Azat Maxam. Tyson Nam has gone through the trenches as of late. He's fighting good opponents after good opponents, and now he's fighting a 16-0. I believe it's Kazakhstan. Fight Night Kazakhstan, which is ridiculous. We shall see how he gets on. Tyson Nam, he has power in his hands, but he's really got to showcase it, get them going, get them working. He's beat Ode Osborne by knockout, lost Matt Chanel, beat Jerome Rivera, so he's showcased his power. But Azat, he's come into the debut off the back of a lot of finishes. I believe maybe he's gone to 3 decisions outside the UFC. This kid is a finisher, but you got to look at the competition ultimately. And this one will be his first big test inside the UFC. And Tyson Nam, yeah, he can hit hard. Anything can happen. Only I'm going to go with Tyson Nam just because of the UFC experience. I think it's quite popular or quite confident that we see a debutant losing unless they're really, really special, which could happen. But I'm going to go Tyson. Carl Deaton versus Alex Munoz. Carl Deaton the third. Coming into this one off the back of his UFC debut versus Joe Zaleski, losing rear naked choke. This one, I mean, I don't have full confidence in either. Carl Denson the third spent a lot of his time outside the UFC, really didn't have success. Alex Muniz has had 2 fights inside the UFC, lost them both to Nazrat Hakupas and Luis Pena. So this one, bit of a picking one to pick. Oscar, who have you got for the last 5 fights?
For the last 5 fights, Jack Della Maddalena said a first-round KO will be happening, and I believe him. I think nobody is on his level outside of that top 15, and he will toy with him and find the opening for the KO in round 1. There's no doubt in my mind. Half as likely as in UFC caliber anyway, so that's easy money. Then you go Evan Elder versus Valdez. Valdez is not a high level guy. He's just a very exciting fighter that the UFC scooped up off a crazy fight on the Contender Series, and I think Evan Elder is legit. As we pointed out, had a fight of the night with Nazim Sadikov, and he trains out of Kelp Cliff FC. I think his striking is much cleaner than Valdez, and he finds him getting a knockout in round 2, and then Tyson Nam versus Azat Maxim. I'm actually going with the debutant here. I think he's actually legit. Even though he hasn't fought crazy good competition, he's very well rounded. And those Kazakhstan fighters are absolute monsters for the most part. I think Tyson Nam, he doesn't have the best style, as he's only looking for that counter hook to get the finish, and if he doesn't, he's kind of whoa. You just send me a tweet saying that Chelsea Chandler says she's heard Ronda Rousey's comeback at 145 pounds. I personally don't believe the rumors that Ronda Rousey's come back just because she's made so much money outside of the sport, and it really appeared that she was done with the sport when she left it. I don't believe the Ronda Rousey rumors until I see some evidence of her training.
Yeah, pretty special if it would happen. Although we were, as you mentioned, at 145 pounds, that one I'm not too sure of because we were talking about it earlier. There's literally no one in that division, so she'll be fighting Norma Dumont for the vacant
I think Norma
championship.
Dumont kills her. I think Norma Dumont probably kills her on the feet.
And on the ground, obviously, it'll be a tough matchup. But you've got to ask yourself, how prepared will Ronda Rousey be stepping into that octagon with the long layoff, with concentrating on WWE for a vast majority of last few years? She's been very, very strict on that and been very, very active. So to learn, obviously, the process and learn how to wrestle and stuff like that. So you just got to wonder where we should be at when she enters the octagon again, if she does.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe the rumors personally, but if the fire has been relighting her, I would love to see it. But I don't think the fire is there at all, and especially the fact that she's already a multi-millionaire from her 5-year stint in the WWE. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yep, completely agree. Ladies and gentlemen, this was UFC Fight Night Home versus Bueno Silva. A few underrated fights. Jack Della Maddalena getting his... Oh, what's that? Sorry.
Let me just give my pick on the last 2 fights here. Scroll down to the bottom. So we have Deaton versus Munoz. I think Munoz is a lock. Munoz is a very good grappler. He just ran into some tough competition to start off against Hackprost and Violent Bob Ross. I think he secures takedowns in every round and wins a unanimous decision. And Evan Smith versus Perez. I think Perez should win this based on the fact that Ashley Evan Smith looked really awful in her last fight, and she's taken a serious layoff. So I think Perez wins the decision there. But outside of that, that caps off this card. I think This card is, as I said, not really stacked, but we could see some fun finishes on this card. Don't expect too much from this one, but we are patiently waiting for that UFC London card coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. We just got to persevere for the next few months, MMA fans, until we get to the pay-per-views. As an Englishman, looking at UFC London card, and to be honest, it's not really, I would say, stacked, but we have been we have had a lot of fantastic fights come to London the last few weeks, or the last few events, sorry. I mean, look at our co-main event last time out. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. I mean, incredible. Tom Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura. Molly McCann versus Georgia Storyenko. Georgia Storyenko not won a single fight inside the UFC, if I'm correct. So, Molly McCann is definitely the pick
She
there.
won.
Oh,
She
she's
beat
had one.
Jessica Rose Clark.
She beat Jessica Rose Clark, but other than that, she's lost to Chelsea Chandler, Alexis Davis, Julia Avia, and Yana Santos. So, Molly McCann is definitely the pick in that one. But yeah, there are some fun fights. Jai Herbert, Leroy Murphy. As an Englishman, there's a lot of English and UK and Irish talent on this one. Nathaniel Wood, Paul Craig.
Any interviews coming to the channel?
Definitely going to try Paul Craig at 185 pounds. I'm going to look to get on Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood is always fantastic to have on. Michael Parkin making his UFC debut. Fantastic prospect up here in the northeast of England, fighting out of Sunderland. TFT MMA Team Fish Tank, and obviously Davey Grant as well. He's up here as well. Mike Casey versus Jorge Alvarez. Wow, that's a really good fight. Chris Duncan getting his showcase in London. Danny Roberts always here. Look at Pani Kinzad.
Davey Grant.
Davey Grant, yeah. Pani Kinzad always
Brian
fighting in
Barberina.
London. Yeah, Brian Barberina, man, versus Mahmoud Muradov. And obviously Shana Bannon making her UFC debut. 5-0 Invicta contender. She looks good. She looks really good. So one to look out for sure. But yeah, that is UFC London. But that is not this week. We just spoke about HOLM versus BUENO SILVA. So make sure you catch us next week to talk about that card, and we get to recap HOLM versus BUENO SILVA. But the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, is I think we've got our mojo back. We've got it. We've got it now. And we should be hosting these week in, week out. But I do not want to jinx anything.
Yeah, let's not jinx it. But you can expect us back next week to preview UFC London and recap UFC Vegas 77. And after that, we're going to get our momentum back. And UFC 291 is at the end of this month, and I have the highest of expectations for that card.
Absolutely. Look at the main event. Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje for the BMF title. Wow, can't wait. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. From me and Oscar, very, very goodbye, and we'll catch you all next week to talk about what happened this weekend, and obviously talk about UFC London. Woo! I can't wait. See you later. Thank you and goodbye.